All along the banks of the Folly, the signs of spring were obvious. New green shoots were piercing upwards from the tangled reeds at the water's edge. Buds had appeared as if overnight on all the willow trees. And the water voles and moorhens were warming themselves in the sunshine. Even the mournful cows in Farmer Lucking's meadow appeared a little happier than usual. Baldmoney, however, wasn't so happy. As he sat fishing, he thought of Dodder, obstinate old Dodder, who was so utterly opposed to their plans to go in search of Cloudberry. He's just a selfish old gnome, thought Baldmoney. Of course it'll be dangerous. Of course we might all be killed. But we must go. Cloudberry's one of us, our brother. We must go to his rescue, if it's not too late. But just as Baldmoney, now fired with new enthusiasm, was facing up to the facts, so was poor old Dodder. The truth was, Dodder realized he'd be no good at all on a dangerous expedition. Not only was he the oldest of the gnomes, but he only had one good leg. Yet if he stayed behind, he'd be left all alone, perhaps forever. Sneezewort was the only one unaffected by the disagreement. And right now he was sitting on the bank conversing with his friend Joe the Crow. Joe was undoubtedly the most fearless bird in the whole neighborhood, which accounted for his scruffy condition. Only that morning he'd narrowly escaped 2 blasts from a double-barreled shotgun. The sorry state of his feathers showed how near a miss it had been. "I see," said Joe. "So you think you might look for Cloudberry. Which way did he go?" "Upstream," answered Sneezewort. "He set out to find the source of the Folly. In other words, he went through Crow Wood." Joe cocked a beady eye at the gnome. "You know what that means, Sneezy?" "We all know what that means," replied Sneezewort. "Giant Grum." "Is he as bad as everyone makes out, Joe?" "Far worse by all accounts," answered Joe. "Crow Wood was an happy place till he came. Now it's a graveyard. If Cloudberry's caught by Grum, then I'm afraid that's that." At that moment, Baldmoney paddled over in his overladen coracle. "Hello, Joe," he called. "What brings you a-visiting today?" "Well, there's been talk along the Folly you might be going on an expedition, so I came along to find out if it's true." "No mite about it. I've made my mind up. We must go." "Well, I'm with you all the way, giant Grum or no giant Grum." "Grum is only one danger, Sneezewort. There'll be many more. Remember, we only know the Folly as far as Moss Mill." "Well, perhaps that's where I can help. As you're so determined to go, I'll take a flight upstream and find out what lies ahead. I'll be back this evening to report." And with that, Joe lazily flapped his wings and took off in a long, low arc across the meadow. Only an hour later, after a delightful lunch of fresh minnow, Baldmoney and Sneezewort set to with great enthusiasm in collecting and preparing wood with which to build a boat for the journey. A boat strong enough for the rough water and even rapids, which might lie ahead. And as they worked, Dodder, who refused to help them, sat sulking underneath the old oak tree. Meanwhile, many miles upstream, Joe the Crow was carrying out his high-flying reconnaissance. He'd gained height over Moss Mill to get well above Crow Wood, and he'd noted every twist and turn in the Folly, every deep pool, every house, bridge, and fallen tree. The Folly, he saw, flowed from what appeared to be a large lake. Had Cloudberry come this far, he wondered? Well, that was for the gnomes to find out. He'd seen enough now to help them. So slowly he winged his way back along the Folly. Lovely day, he thought. A good breeze and warm, too. But at that moment, a distant sound snapped him out of his daydreaming. Joe looked down and realized that he'd lost height, for below him, close to, stretched the whole forbidding acreage of Crow Wood. Bare branches clawed upwards from the tallest trees like so many grasping fingers. Below them, like a deep pool, lay the darkness of the wood. Now, the trouble with Joe was that he had lots of spirit, but little common sense. And he thought that a quick look at Crow Wood might be quite an adventure. After all, the gnomes would have to travel through the wood on their expedition, so why not take a look? Joe's mind was made up, so he headed down silently and entered the domain of Giant Grum. For a moment, he stood still on the carpet of dry leaves that lay throughout the wood. There was an evil presence here. No birdsong, no noise at all except the gentle moaning of the wind. Slowly, his eyes became accustomed to this gloomy place in which there seemed no life at all. What was that? Joe looked around cautiously, eyeing the shadows. There it was again, closer this time. He looked around once more, and then he heard the laugh.
Get him, boy!
Joe leapt upwards for his life as vicious teeth dragged through his feathers. He struggled to gain height, to get up and away from this snarling creature. But just as he gained the middle branches of a tree, he felt pain in his leg and wing, a searing, burning pain that made his eyes cloud over with hot tears. He fluttered desperately, fighting his way through the clinging branches. Then, at last, he was free. He was above the wood, away from the terror below. In great pain and with the utmost difficulty, Joe flew close to the treetops of Crow Wood. Another shot rang out, but it was distant this time and fell far behind. Swerving, twisting, turning, he saw at last the edge of the wood, and he dived beyond it to hug the fields, heading for the friendly and familiar banks of the Folly Brook. Several hours later, the sun was setting over the folly, and the old oak trees stood gaunt and leafless against the evening sky. There was a chill in the air, but not enough to deter the creatures of the stream who'd gathered at this spot to hear Joe's story. Poor Joe. He rested on the ground in such a sorry state, while the whole assembly listened to his story in silence and in horror, for it confirmed their worst fears of Crow Wood. "So whatever you do, gnomes," said Joe, still trembling, "you must never go near that evil place, for Grum is a killer." All eyes turned to Baldmoney. Surely he must realize now that to venture into Crow Wood was utter madness. Baldmoney drew himself up to his full height, which, to be quite honest, was not all that impressive, but his expression was determined as he addressed the gathering. "As you all know, our brother Cloudberry set off 6 months ago to find the source of the folly. Since then, we've heard nothing. He may be alive, he may be dead, but the only way to find out is to search along the banks of the folly. And as the folly flows through Crow Wood, we must go there, for in that wretched place, we may find the answer."
Brave speech.
Couldn't agree more with you.
That's
Now,
right.
Baldmoney was undoubtedly very old and very wise, but he was also very small, so these were brave words indeed, and his audience admired his spirit. It started with nods of agreement and grunts of approval, and it grew to a general murmur of respect. And then it became a clapping and a cheering, for here was one creature among them who was not going to be put off by the horror of Giant Grum. That night, while the gnomes, hidden away in the old oak tree, planned the details of their expedition. The heavens were split asunder by the greatest storm ever known along the Folly. It was as if someone, somewhere, was trying to warn them of the terrible dangers that lay ahead.